Okay, I know I've been absent a while, just been out riding a lot, been busy over the summer, but I just wanted to do a video on a new bike I picked up for winter. Basically just to sit alongside the other A2 bikes, just as something different really. And if I'm honest, an excuse for me to buy a bike that I've wanted ever since they first came out in about 2013, 2014. It's a CCM GP450. So this is a British built bike, CCM. They made a lot of scramble bikes in the 70s, and then they went out of business, and then they were bought, and then they went through different owners. They used a lot of Suzuki engines, the 404, etc., in the early 2000s. They went quiet for a decade or so, and then they come back in about 2012 with plans for this single-cylinder adventure bike, which was GP450. So it's a BMW engine out of the G450X, I believe, built by Kimco. Puts out about 40 horsepower. The beauty of the CCM is that they tried to really make it lightweight. So you got an aluminium bonded frame, so it's all glued together. The bolts are there just as a sort of a backup. But as I understood it, the frame would stand up to abuse without any bolts. So quite an innovative, unique approach to frame design. It was high quality spec, Marzocchi front forks, attractive rear shock, which is fully adjustable. It had got rear fuel access, and I think about 18 litres, 17 litres that sits under the tank. You got the rally cockpit, decent frame protection, decent screen. So the idea was for them to make a lightweight adventure bike, and I guess it came out to mixed reviews. I rode a prototype. I just got back from my America trip, riding up to Alaska on the Postie bike, and I got a job at Adventure Bike Rider magazine. And one of my first assignments was going up to Bolton to ride the prototype. And I've got to be honest, I was a fish out of water. I'd never ridden anything like this before, and didn't really know what to expect, and didn't know if it was good in comparison to anything else. I remember I was taking Alan Clues, who runs a company, the family name from which the CCM takes its name, and he sent me off on some trails in the Lake District, and I got a bit of a handful as a novice off-road rider, but it was quite rough. The fueling was rough low down. I remember it sort of hunting a lot and chugging a lot through the slower speed stuff. But as I sort of rode a bit more and I got more time on the CCM over the next year or two as it went through the development process, I just really came to admire what they did. They were a very interactive company. They were at all the shows, asking people's feedback. They were taking it back to the drawing board. The guy who designed it, Chris Radcliffe, I think I've got his surname right. It might be slightly different, but Chris, who worked at CCM, just a young lad who designed it from the ground up, and he went on to design their Spitfire and stuff. It was a really small operation, small team of people doing the best to design the best possible lightweight adventure bike they could. The criticism was that it was the engine, it was the wrong engine, so people wanted a bigger engine. The fact it was a Dakar race-inspired or race-derived engine meant that some didn't see it suitable for the slower, gentler pace of adventure travel. A lot grumbled about the price when it came out at the time. It was £8,000, which I guess in 2014 seemed a lot of money. Equivalently at the time, say the Husqvarna TR650 was about 5.5. Tenere 660 was about 6.5, I suspect. So it seemed a bit expensive, but then, I mean, 5 years on, it seems a bit of a bargain when the CRF 300 Rally is 6.1 and the Tenere is 9.5, etc. Then actually £8,000 for a hand-built, very light, very unique and specific type of bike actually seems pretty good value. They weren't without the gremlins. I think most people who own one had some issues at some point in time. A lot of the issues were electrical. I think the hard parts were fine. I think maybe the wiring was always a little bit, or could be a little bit suspect. So people have issues with all the wiring tucked in behind the cockpit and things like that. And I think if you were buying a bike as a completely dependable machine to take you on a long distance, it turned out maybe not to be the right bike. Although people did do big trips on them and had no problems, others did suffer a few mechanical woes. But I just love the concept of it. I just really, everything they tried to do. And in fairness, and I suppose in all honesty, the project, their ambition was bigger than what their small resources could achieve. They were a very small team of people with a very small budget. So they didn't have the design and development fund that any of the manufacturers had, but at the same time, they didn't have the sort of stymian corporate structure that results in sort of these diluted adventure bikes that we get from the big manufacturers. So the CRF 300 Rally, for example, could be a lot better if it was built by a small team and driven by a small team. The Tenere 700 would be a better bike if it was built just with the complete focus on building the best bike they could. I think a lot of the big brands, their products get diluted by the fact they're driven by corporations, which ultimately squeeze out some of the real finesse and love of a product. So, people say, well, if one of the big manufacturers had built this bike, it would be a lot better. The reality is I don't think a big manufacturer would have built a bike like this or could build a bike like this, because financially it might not make sense in the small numbers that CCM needed to sell to make profit. I think they sold about 300 or made about 300 or 400 of these, so not a huge number. I've ridden it briefly, and I've got to say, wow, it's much better than I remember. It's so smooth, and it's such a strong engine in it, really surgy, and people complained it needed the 6-speed, which it did eventually get it because the Husqvarna version of this engine did have 6-speed. So they did 25 bikes with the 6-speed box in. That did seem a bit fickle, though. A few breakdowns and engine failures on this one. So the 5-speed BMW box seems to be the better one. So yeah, I've just added this to the fleet basically because I've always wanted one. I nearly chopped in my GS 1200 for one maybe 4 or 5 years ago when John at the factory was offering me a great discount, but at the time it just seemed a little bit one-dimensional. I needed a bike that I could use two up and long distance riding, and I just felt the GS 1200 at the time was more of an all-rounder, whereas this was a little bit niche. But now I'm doing more closer to home riding and offering people the chance to try a different selection of bikes. I think this sits quite nicely as something a little bit boutique against the KTM 390 Adventure and the CRF 300 Rally and the Himalayan and the what else I've got, the CB500X Rally Raid, etc. So yeah, I bought it as much for myself as I have for anybody else. But the idea is that people can come down here and just see what the fuss was about, or see maybe why it failed. I guess it's all open to individual interpretation. But I am going to go out on it on the trails. I'll do a video out and about on it and let you know how it got on. So that's it, CCM GP450. For anybody curious, it's got 9,500 miles on it, and I paid 4,150, which is probably bottom of the price range of a GP450. It has been well used, this one. It looks like it's been used actually on the tet, so it's been tetted. And there's a few scuff marks, and it's clearly been used. It's not a pristine bike. But from what I can see, all the modifications to make it a stronger bike have been done. So the luggage hoops bolts to this rear hanger, which was always susceptible to snapping. I understand it. So they've strengthened that, and I think they put the breather in there to stop oil coming back through the airbox. I believe that does. So it's got all the sort of sensible mods in just to make it a little bit more usable. Let's fire it up, see what she sounds like. Just give it a minute. Yeah. So it sounds a little bit more racy than a Himalayan, I've got to say. So that's it. The reason this place is set up like your nan's front room is because we had Bruce Smart down here, Teapot One, who did the trip around the world on the GSX 1000. He was doing a talk, so we put the screen up and the sofas out. So I had about 30 odd people down here. So look out for other speakers who are going to come down and do a talk in here. Otherwise, the CT125s are now registered, so I've been out running them in. I'll be doing a video on that. They're good. They're not any faster really than the 110s, but they're definitely smoother, easier to ride, and easier to get on with. Probably not as good trail bikes, but that's to be expected given they're a bit heavier and a bit wider. In other updates, the Himalayan Euro 5 that broke down on one of my previous videos, that was collected by Cooper up in Northampton, who I bought it from, and they're looking into it. It looks like it's not a relay issue, so that seemed to be the common, obvious thing that seems to be affecting a few bikes, but it doesn't seem to be the problem on my bike. So they're doing a bit more investigation on that. Equally, I've just put up the Himalayan Bunkhouse weekend. I think it's 18th or 19th of November, just down here in North Devon. So if anybody wants to book on that, get on to dorothyspeedshop.com. But for now, I'm going to leave you with the images of the CCM GP450, Britain's, I guess, premier adventure bike. Okay, people say it's not a British bike because the engine's from Germany or China, wherever it was built, and I don't know, the brakes are from Italy or blah, blah, blah. But the fact is, it was a British chap sat in a British office with a British pen and paper and with a small team of people who were driven by the desire to build the perfect purpose-built lightweight adventure bike. Maybe it's not perfect. Maybe it didn't hit the spot in every single way, but I've got to admire the underdog spirit of that, and I guess that's why I bought one, and that's why there's one here for people to ride. So that's it. I'll see you on the trails later with it. Cheers.